While many fans view this as a staunch downgrade year in every position, with the Gladiators losing fan favorites and elite players such as Shu, Skewed, Reiner, and Happy, they managed to put together a very strong roster despite losing all that talent and are slowly creeping into the top 5 of many people's power rankings. But is it deserved? Let's find out. I'll start with the DPS line. The Gladiators have held on to DPS superstar, back-to-back role star Kevster from last year, picked up one of the hardest carry players in years in Yaki, fresh out of the New York Excelsior, and finally picked up hitscan star Kai from the Atlanta Reign. Honestly, a really fucking stacked DPS lineup on paper. Kevster is probably a top 2 or 3 DPS in the world, being right up there with Proper in a lot of cases and having huge value. He's an insane talent. Then Yaki is almost right up there as well. He's quietly an elite player, one of the best flex DPS out there, hard carrying on 2 incredibly disappointing rosters now. People need to go back and watch both the New York versus Houston game, their game versus Dallas, their game versus Gladiators. The amount of carrying he did to make New York somewhat competitive cannot be overlooked. He's an elite flex DPS, and I'm excited to see what he can do with an actual team around him. The only real issue? He has the exact same hero pool as Kevster. I don't really see him getting a ton of playtime over Kevster, but we're seeing them try things like Tracer Echo and Scrims, so maybe it's possible they can play together. And we are all familiar with how good Kai can be. He was a top 3 hitscan DPS in Season 4 and an MVP candidate last year. While I don't know if he was a top 5 hitscan list last year, he didn't look as good as he did in the midseason madness. He's still an outstanding player with a lot to prove. I'm going to be generous and give this DPS line, I'll say it's an 8 out of 10. Yaki seems a bit out of place, and I have questions about Kai's current form. But if everything goes right, this is a DPS line brimming with talent that should be competing for the best in the league. But I'll give him 8.5. With the potential to be a 10 if the coaching staff play their cards right, which, knowing them, they probably will. Next up, the tank. The Gladiators are currently running Dante as their only tank. This is where I get a bit controversial, but I don't think I like this move that much. Yeah, Dante really impressed expectations last year and was a surprisingly great solo tank for Houston, but really, how good is he? He had a great Doom and Zarya and a solid Junker Queen and Diva, but his Winston was quite poor, being statistically bottom tier despite his team placing 3rd. And his Wrecking Ball and Sigma from Scrims leaves a lot to be desired. Yes, he's a surprisingly good talent with a lot of potential, but as the only tank, I do not think he's going to cut it, mainly on the main tanks. Like, sure, he can be a surprisingly good talent, but when he goes up against tanks like Junbin, Donghack, Fearless, I think he falls off, especially in the main tank meta that we're going into. I'll say 5 out of 10. I'm happy to eat my words, though. Next, the support line. They grabbed Lastro from the Outlaws, Babel from O2 Blast, and retained Funny Astro from last year's Gladiators iteration. This is a really solid support line, though a downgrade from what was. Obviously, Funny Astro was a side grade, still a top tier Lucio, but unimpressive in other heroes. Lastro seems to be the skewed replacement, and honestly, I think Lastro was an upgrade. He's even more flexible, and better on most flex supports. Even if skewed has a higher peak on heroes like Brig, but the real blow is Babel to Shu, or Shu to Babel. Don't get me wrong, Babel is a great support, and he was arguably the weakest O2 Blast starter though. He was still an outstanding talent, mainly on Brig, Kiriko, and Ana, but compared to Shu, it's a clear downgrade. Not really slight to him, but more so that Shu was just so dominant, it's impossible to even get a side grade to that. And I just can't see Babel really living up to that, and I think he'll just be stuck in Shu's shadow. I'll give the support line a 8 out of 10. It's honestly a really good support line, especially if Glads can bring the best out of Babel, which I have no doubt they can. But it's a clear downgrade from last year, where the support line was arguably the best in the world. A shame, but the support line has quite a bit of talent and is extremely flexible. Finally, the coaching. They held on to the same coaches from last year, FaZe, Unter, and Smash. I'll say 9 out of 10 coaching. This is a fantastic coaching staff that's using all of the collective Australian power to get there. I'm giving some of the other roles higher points, mainly due to my faith in this staff to develop that talent. Yeah, they could have done more to reverse the downward momentum of the Glads in the second half of the season last year, but these are some smart guys that'll lead these guys to a lot of success. These guys are weird. I want to like them a lot, and I think they'll be top 5 most likely, but it's just weird. It just seems like this team is using pure DPS star power to make up for the clear downgrades in other positions. Not that their support or tanks are bad, but it just seems much more a DPS carry team compared to last year, where every position was more or less equally top tier. But goddamn is that DPS line nasty. Overall, I do like this team, and I think they'll probably be in the lower part of the top 5 range. I think they're clearly worse than Shock Rain and Outlaws, but they're pretty nasty and dangerous, and I could definitely see them pulling off some upsets. Thanks for watching.